So friends, today I am going to explain a recently released Thai horror movie on Netflix, which is quite good, named Tom Watcher. The movie is very dangerous, and its ending has a very dangerous twist and meaning, which I have explained in depth for you. So you will have to watch the video till the end. So now, without any further delay, let's head straight to the video. The movie begins by showing the chief, who is leaning over a glass chamber. And from here the story goes into a flashback to when he first met Lunthom. Here we come to know that the chief was actually fond of painting. He explains that he felt from the first glance that both of them, Chief and Lunthom, were made for each other. Whenever he saw her, he would lose himself in her beauty and consider himself the luckiest person in the world, and in no time, they both got married, meaning they were lovers and later got married. Now, the chief narrates that he had promised himself to always keep his wife happy. But one day, Lunthom suddenly falls very ill and goes into a state of unconsciousness. Everyone tells the chief to forget his wife, but he refuses because he still had hope, and when Lunthom dies, the chief vows that he will always be with her. But how is this possible? We will find out more about this later. Now cut to Rose, who was an employee in an office. Rose is packing her belongings after finishing her office work, after which she comes out of the building. Before exiting the building, she throws a cardboard box into the dustbin. She looked quite sad here, maybe because it was her last day at the office. Now, after reaching home, her mother calls and says that she wants to meet her boyfriend to discuss marriage, because her mother was worried about what people would say if the boy and girl were living together before marriage. Here we learn one thing, that Rose's boyfriend was from Bangkok, because her mother used to call him Bangkok Boy. Rose tries to stall a bit about this and cuts the call, because a car had come to pick her up. Here we learn an important thing, that Lunthom was actually Rose's boss. Now the movie goes to 1991 Bangkok, where the story tells that Rose was going to a party with her friends. In a car, everyone was talking a lot, but Rose was lost in thought, secretly looking out the window. Then her friends start talking to her and ask her the reason for her boss's death. Rose says that she has no idea about it. Maybe it was some illness. Now they all go to the club, and she is drinking and dancing with her friends. She had drunk quite a lot when she suddenly sees the ghost of a lady, and in panic, she goes towards the washroom. But on the way, she notices that the club was completely empty. The atmosphere had become quite scary. Then she feels that someone is following her. Now, suddenly someone whose hands were completely black starts pulling her hair from behind. Then Rose wakes up in shock, because all this was a terrifying nightmare of hers. Then Rose goes to the kitchen and sees the chief, meaning the chief was with Rose after Lunthom's death. Now, Rose shares her dream with the chief, but the chief consoles her and says that there is no one else here, except the two of them, and he hugs her. Now, Rose repeats her mother's demand that they should get married, but the chief says that they will go after Lunthom's funeral. Hearing this, Rose gets a little upset. But then the chief plans to surprise Rose and asks her to pack her bags, and this makes Rose quite happy, and she went to pack the bags. But as soon as she goes inside, worry appears on the chief's face. Was he hiding something from Rose? Well, the next day, they both set off on a journey. Now, on the way, the chief meets a lady, and they were talking about document-related matters, and Rose was alone in the car. Then she sees a girl and a boy in the building opposite. When we look closely, we realize that it was none other than Rose and Chief, meaning Rose was remembering her past, meaning perhaps how they met. This fact will be revealed. In the past scene, we see Rose with that pack of cigarettes, but then that boy, the chief, offers her a cigarette as he too had come there to smoke. Now, when Rose accepts the cigarette, she starts to blush a little. Here we learn that this was their first meeting, as I said, and Rose liked him. Now, further on, we notice Rose working in the office, and the chief passes her a smile and goes into the cabin where Lunthom was already present. The chief hugs Lunthom from behind, and Rose is watching all this. So one thing we understand is that even when the chief and Lunthom were together, Rose liked him, meaning the chief. It's also possible that the chief was just normally passing her a smile, good behavior, but many people think he's hitting on her, but that wasn't the case here. Now, in the further scenes, we see Rose sitting on the stairs because it was raining quite heavily outside. Now, the chief looks at her from the top of the stairs and tells her to wait for the rain to stop, and then both of them go to the chief's house together. They talk there, and the chief asks her name, and she tells him her name is Rose. Then the chief also tells his own name, to which Rose says that she already knows his name. Now, The chief says nothing and just smiles. Well, now the movie returns to the present time, in which the chief tells her about Lunthom's documents, which contained an agreement that was very important to follow if they wanted Lunthom's property, and Rose gets confused knowing this. But the chief convinces her, and they both leave for their trip. Now, on the way, some villagers were performing a ritual, and a shaman stares at them strangely, which makes Rose quite uncomfortable, and she tells the chief to drive faster. Now, finally, they both reach their destination, where a very beautiful house was built in the middle of the jungle, with a tree in front of it. Rose gets very happy seeing this and asks what the rent for one night is, but the chief says that it is his own house, it is not rented, and he bought this house only for Rose because she did not like small houses. And Rose was quite shocked and emotional that the chief was doing so much for her. Now, when they go inside, the chief shows Rose their master bedroom, which she liked very much, but she still could not believe that this house was hers. The night scene comes when Rose is making drinks, and then she sees the same shaman performing a ritual outside. In fear, she calls the chief, and the chief takes his gun and scares the shaman away. Now, a very strange scene comes next. A gate opens, and in the background, the voices of the chief and Rose are heard, talking about the shaman. The chief says that these shamans spread rumors of hauntings and then cheat people out of money under the guise of rituals. And here we suddenly get a ghost's POV, meaning there was something here that the chief was not telling her, or perhaps both of them did not know about it. Well, now the chief and Rose kiss, and an intimate scene is shown. Now, after a while, Rose is in the bathtub, and then she sees Lunthom's ghost. She screams in shock and looks around, but there was no one there. Well, now they both are sleeping when Rose suddenly wakes up, but she does not find the chief there, even though they slept together. She searches for him all over the house and calls out, but there is no answer. Now, when she is in the living room, suddenly the main door opens by itself, and she goes outside without paying attention, but then something falls on her hand from the tree, and she looks up, but there is nothing there. She felt quite strange, but she dismisses it, thinking it must be her imagination. She goes to look further into the jungle when she finds a cottage where a bulb was lit. Now, looking inside, there were many old things kept. And she goes inside a room, and we get a shock, just like Rose did. There, in a glass coffin, was Lunthom's dead body, which was preserved. Now, the chief was also there, doing some work, and when he sees Rose, he consoles her. Rose was very scared, and also angry. Then the chief tells her something that shocked Rose. Now, here the chief tells a very weird thing, that it was written in Lunthom's will that if her body was preserved for 100 days, and he stayed with her, he would get all the property. But if he couldn't stick it out, he would have to return empty-handed. But the weird thing was, why did Lunthom put such a wish in her will? Now Rose realizes that the house she thought was hers was not hers at all, meaning the chief also lied about this, and this makes her even more angry. But the chief convinces her that after 100 days, they can easily get married illegally. Well, now we again go into a flashback where Lunthom had seen the chief cheating with Rose in the office, meaning the chief was with someone else even while he was with Lunthom, The starting plot showed it a little differently, but the real twist comes now, meaning the chief was indeed cheating on Lunthom. Well, now when the chief comes home, Lunthom points to a pack of cigars and a note on which, "Thanks for the cigarettes," was written and asks whose they are. Then he makes an excuse that a boy gave them to him in the factory, but we know that he himself offered cigarettes to Rose, but Lunthom keeps asking. Then he gets frustrated and starts blaming Lunthom that she is busy with work all day and doesn't think about them. He also has some physical and emotional needs. Now, hearing this, Lunthom gets emotional and both hug, and the chief also apologizes. In the next scene, both of them, Lunthom and the chief, were going towards a jungle by car, and this is the same jungle where Rose and the chief had gone for that house. Here we hear a very strange thing, that the same things that Rose and the chief were talking about during their car ride, the same things were being said by Lunthom and the chief here as well, meaning the same conversations were happening, even the scenes as well, because they also stopped in front of the same house. Now, both of them look at the house, and the chief starts asking whose house this is. Then Lunthom says that this is their house. Now, the chief points to the tree in front of the house, and here Lunthom says that this tree represents their relationship, and this is the same tree that Rose saw in front of her, and she also asked the same thing. The story now returns to the present time, showing Rose and the chief, where they both wake up. The chief asks her to go somewhere. Then further on, we hear the chief and Rose talking, and both were quite happy now. Rose was cutting salad at that time, but suddenly, we see Lunthom's spirit in the window in front of Rose, but Rose does not notice this. Now, in the next scene, Rose feels someone's presence, but as soon as she turns around, she sees no one there. Then Lunthom's spirit suddenly comes from behind and, controlling her hand, tries to cut her hand with a knife. Then she hears the chief's voice, and she regains consciousness, meaning all this was her delusion, or we can say that she was under someone's control. Well, now they both leave for a picnic and reach a very high place, and from there, they can see the entire city view. Rose is very happy seeing this, and she also praises their house, saying that their house looked very good from there. But then she sadly talks about that tree, saying that this tree is ominous, according to local beliefs. This tree attracts spirits, and therefore it is considered a bad omen. In the movie, it is used as a symbolic sign that points to impending danger, but the chief convinces her here under the pretext of planting a new tree. Now, further on, as they were going towards the house, they see a storehouse. Rose goes inside, but the chief was repeatedly stopping her, meaning the chief looked quite worried here, as if he wanted Rose not to go inside. But why would he want that? Well, now Rose goes inside, and the chief also follows her. There were many things covered with white clothes. Rose removes a cloth, and her happiness disappeared in an instant, because they were Lunthom's paintings that the chief had painted. She gets angry and asks the chief to paint her own picture, and here Rose felt as if the chief had not forgotten Lunthom even today. Well, now both of them were sitting by the river, and the chief tells her different poses so that he can paint. Now he starts painting when we see a lady wearing a gown in the reflection of the water, but only her lower body was visible. Now she moves from Rose's direction to the chief's direction and suddenly disappears. Now we get to see quite weird things that the chief was drawing with very strange expressions, as if someone had possessed him, and he was drawing without blinking his eyes. Rose calls out to him many times, but when he doesn't listen, she comes closer and shakes him, and then he comes to his senses. Anyways, now as soon as they both see the painting, they are surprised because this painting was not of Rose but of Lunthom, and all this was actually done by Lunthom's spirit, because the chief had no idea how the painting became Lunthom's, and Rose leaves from there in anger because she did not trust this. And yes, this tree here is also named Lunthom tree, which is considered a ghost tree because it glows at night. And it is said that ghosts and spirits are attracted to it, so you must be understanding what Rose's concern was here. Well, now it's night, and we notice that someone was cutting the branches of the Lunthom tree. Inside, Rose cooks food and calls the chief, and then he comes, meaning he was the one cutting the branches, and he starts praising the food, to which Rose sarcastically says that it's not as good as the chief's ex-wife's. Now, the chief explains this to her, where we learn that the chief and Lunthom were together for 7 years, and Lunthom used to paint him daily, which had annoyed him, and hearing this, Rose gets a little peace. When they both are sleeping at night, suddenly many black hands grab her and start pulling her into the bed, but then she wakes up, meaning this was also a nightmare. But as soon as she turns towards the chief, he is not visible there, but it was Lunthom's spirit. She screams in fear, which wakes up the chief, and he consoles her, meaning the chief was there. Now, in the morning, both of them were watching a prize pool game on TV. Then Rose starts expressing her objection to staying there, but the chief does not agree, and we learn that both of them have to stay here for 100 days. Otherwise, they get nothing. The chief appeared quite greedy here. Now, when Rose hears this, she gets angry that the chief is using her for his own benefit, but the chief convinces her and manipulates her by saying that he will take care of her from now on, just as he had been doing from the beginning. Now, at night, at the gate of that storehouse, we see Lunthom standing in front of Lunthom's painting, with black tears flowing from her eyes. Then the scene goes into a flashback where Lunthom had fallen down the stairs while crying. When the doctor checks her, he tells the chief that Lunthom's condition is dangerous and her life could be lost at any moment. Now, the chief takes very special care of Lunthom, but he also continues to meet Rose secretly. Now, Lunthom also knew this, and one day she warns Rose on the office terrace to stay away from her husband, and then leaves, and the atmosphere becomes very tense. Lunthom and the chief have many arguments, and her condition was also deteriorating. She tells the chief to quit, but the chief convinces her, but she doesn't agree. Now, in anger, what happens is that Lunthom falls and tries to get up, but she cannot get up. She asks the chief for help, but now he doesn't care. He just says that you pushed me away, and now you are asking for help, and then Lunthom dies. So this is how Lunthom died. Now, we come to the present time where Rose and the chief are partying. Now Rose extinguishes her cigar on Lunthom's forehead in the coffin, meaning on the glass. She was imagining as if she was extinguishing it on her forehead. Well, now they both dance when Rose sees Lunthom in the window, and then she disappears. But as soon as she turns towards the chief, she sees Lunthom there. Now she grabs him by the neck and throws him, and then the chief picks him up, meaning she was seeing Lunthom instead of the chief. Now Rose angrily goes to break the coffin, but the chief stops her, and they both start fighting a lot. But then Rose sees Lunthom again, but the chief cannot see her. The chief forbids her from coming into that room, and the chief was sitting on the couch, and Rose was sitting on the counter drinking. Then suddenly, for 2 seconds, we see Lunthom grabbing the chief's neck. But the chief was completely normal, but we noticed that Rose was feeling that someone was there. Well, now we are shown the morning scene where when Rose wakes up, she finds out that her pills are gone, so she calls the chief. Chief ignores this and drives away somewhere in the car. Then Rose feels someone's presence, and then the spirit picks her up and throws her down, and this injured her a lot. A nail got stuck in her hand, from which blood was also flowing, and her face was also covered with blood. She tries to go outside, but the gate was closed, and then her face twists, and her teeth break and come into her hand. Now, then she sees Lunthom passing in front of her house, and this same thing was also coming on TV. But Lunthom suddenly disappears, but Rose sees her running towards her, but Rose takes a knife and starts advancing towards Lunthom, and just as she is about to strike her, the chief appears there instead of Lunthom, who grabs her hand. Meaning Rose was having very terrible hallucinations, or was Lunthom's spirit really here? Now she tells the chief everything, but shockingly, her hand was completely clean, and so was her face. Rose was quite shocked and also angry about what was happening to her. Now here we learn that the chief had gone to get medicine for her because it had run out, meaning he had hurt her. Now, she goes to the coffin house, where she sees the chief being intimate with Lunthom's dead body, but this was also her delusion, because the chief was just putting ice on the body to preserve it. Here the chief gets very angry because even after he told her not to come there, she came. Now, frustrated by all this, the next day she goes to the shaman who appeared at the beginning. She was asking for help. The shaman performs a ritual in which he sacrifices a chicken and puts its blood on himself. Now, when the ritual is going on, insects appear on Lunthom's body, meaning despite the ice, it was starting to rot. Here the shaman sets fire to the Lunthom tree, and as soon as the chief sees this, he angrily takes a gun and scares them, and breaks everything. Now, in fear, the shaman runs away from there, and it had also started raining there. The chief and Rose have a lot of arguments, and Rose takes her bag and starts leaving, but the chief stops her again. But now she does not stop, and then he reveals that he only let Lunthom die for Rose, and the chief starts crying a lot here as Rose is driving, thinking. She narrowly avoids an accident. Now, thinking something, she turns the car back and comes to the chief. The chief was in the bathtub, but now we were feeling quite creepy because the chief was behaving as if someone had possessed him. Rose cuts his hair, but he does not even blink, and he scratches his nail on the wood when his nail breaks, but strangely, he does not give any reaction. Now, Rose is looking for medicine in the first aid kit when in the mirror we see Lunthom's spirit behind Rose. But from behind Rose, the chief goes into the towel, meaning Lunthom had controlled the chief. She had completely possessed him. Now, further on, when Rose looks towards the hall, she sees the chief in the dark there. But here comes a twist. That the chief was completely clean-shaven and was wearing Lunthom's gown. Now the chief, meaning the one whom Lunthom's spirit had possessed, starts running after Rose with a knife, screaming, in a very terrible demonic voice, and in between we could also see glimpses of Lunthom inside the chief. Now, many times Rose also strikes him in between, but it does not affect him. Rose now runs into the jungle, but he finds her there too and pushes her into the nearby river, and there, he repeatedly smashes Rose's head on a stone and kills her, and the water was completely red with blood, and in it, we see Lunthom's face instead of the chief's, which shows that he was completely possessed. Now, Lunthom's voice starts coming that she will not let Rose die, and with this, Rose's eyes open, and she finds herself in the same coffin where Lunthom's dead body was until now, and now Rose sees Lunthom circling around the coffin, and this was quite a creepy scene, meaning Lunthom's spirit here wanted to punish these two. She did not want these two to get out of here in any way, and she does the same thing that Rose was doing with her body here, just as she had extinguished the cigar, in exactly the same way. She starts dropping blood drops on her forehead. Rose was crying for help a lot, but Lunthom's spirit screams very loudly, which breaks the glass of the coffin. Well, now after this, we see the conclusion of this movie, which was very dangerous, inside a coffin. We see that both of them, Lunthom and the chief, were there, and we can see that both their bodies were covered with insects. Here the chief was quite scared because he was seeing his fate, that either he is dead or he is going to die here with his wife. Because he had said here that he would be with her until the very end, so here Lunthom had made sure that exactly that happened, and lying right below both their coffins was Rose, on whose lips dirty decomposed liquid was falling, and she had no choice but to tolerate it, because the spirit had made sure, meaning Lunthom's spirit had made sure that her husband stayed with her because she could not live without him, but his mistress would stay below them, underneath them, meaning, you see how badly the spirit trapped them. And boom, with this, the movie Tom Watcher ends here. So friends, this was the story of this movie. Now let's talk about what exactly happened here. Now look, the chief here was initially a quite ordinary guy, and he loved Lunthom. Here, or we can say he faked it so that he wouldn't have to go back to his normal life, that he would have money, everything, but ultimately, their marriage and their relationship, become a little weak, or let's say the spiciness had ended. Due to which Rose, his mistress, comes into the chief's life, with whom he started spending a lot of time. He was cheating with her, and Lunthom had seen this, after which, he suddenly had a panic attack, and after that, the reason for his illness was unknown to anyone, obviously. He had a lot of psychological problems, or it can be said that he literally had a heartbreak. Now, the chief here tries very hard to fix his relationship with Lunthom, but it could not happen at the same time. He had also fallen in love with Rose, and he used to meet her, and Lunthom knew all this, that he was doing this. Now, Lunthom had clearly said that she would not stay with him and would separate, and the biggest thing was that the chief would not get even a single rupee here, and due to this, he got very scared, and when Lunthom had a panic attack, he deliberately did not save her, because the chief thought that if Lunthom survived, she would divorce him, and after the divorce, he would have to go back to his useless life. He would not get any money, but if he did not save Lunthom, the money would also be his. At the same time, Rose would also be his, and they would have fun together. But Lunthom was one step ahead of them. She knew that she could not live without him. She had deliberately had all this done in the will beforehand, and perhaps she might have had some ritual performed so that her body remained preserved and her soul also remained here, actually, in Thailand. It is believed that after death, the soul stays on Earth for 90 or 100 days, so Lunthom must have done the same thing. She had deliberately written all this in the will, and look, in the end, if Rose had run away in the car when she left, she would have been saved, but she chose to come back, and what happened after that, so now these people will rot inside this cabin until someone else finds their bodies years later, because obviously, no one lived nearby, so until someone finds their bodies here, no one will know what happened to them, and obviously, by that time, the spirit will kill both of them, so I hope that now you have understood the movie Tom Watcher well. If you have understood, then like the video. In case you still have any doubt, you can ask in the comment section. I will answer you as soon as possible, but I hope that I have explained a lot, and you must have understood things in detail now, and here Lunthom's soul was real, and she had cursed both of them here, meaning in the end, their fate has been sealed, and both of them will not survive now. So if you liked the video, then like it. If you are new to the channel, then subscribe, so I will meet you all in the next video. Until then, stay well.